The ship came out of hyperspace like a wounded beast, trailing fire and broken metal across the void. Commander James Rourke watched from the bridge of the U.E.'s Defiant as sensors picked up the rogue vessel. It was massive, nearly 3 times the size of any human ship, and it had just destroyed 2 colony outposts in the Kepler system. "That's the Varath destroyer," Lieutenant Ana Torres said from her station. "The one that went dark 6 months ago." James nodded slowly. The Varath were allies, or at least they had been. Something had changed on that ship. Something had turned its crew into killers. Now it was heading toward the Mayan colony on Helios 4, and there was nothing between it and 30,000 human colonists except the Defiant and her sister ship, the Valiant. "Captain Webb is hailing us," Torres reported. The face of Marcus Webb appeared on the main screen. He was an older man with gray hair and sharp eyes. His ship, the Valiant, hung in space beside the Defiant. "James, we've got maybe 40 minutes before that thing reaches weapons range of the colony," Webb said. "Our orders are to stop it. Any ideas?" James looked at the tactical display. The Varath ship was heavily armored and packed with weapons that could tear through human shields like paper. A direct fight would be suicide, but running was not an option. Not with innocent people in danger. "We need to be smart about this," James said. "We can't beat them in a straight fight, but maybe we don't have to." He pulled up the sensor data on the rogue ship. It was venting atmosphere from several sections. Its shields were flickering in places. Whatever had happened to it before arriving here, it had not escaped unharmed. "They're damaged," James continued. "If we can make them chase us into the asteroid field near Helios 3, we might be able to use the terrain against them." Webb raised an eyebrow. "That field is dense, James. Navigating it at combat speeds is dangerous. For them, yes. For us?" James smiled slightly. "We've trained for this. Remember the serpentine exercises?" A slow grin spread across Webb's face. The serpentine exercises were infamous among human pilots. They involved flying at maximum speed through obstacle courses that would make most species sick just watching. Humans had evolved on a planet with predators, with danger around every corner. Their reflexes were faster, their spatial awareness sharper. It was one of the few advantages they had against the more advanced alien civilizations. "You want to lead them on a chase through hell," Webb said. "I want to turn their strength into weakness," James replied. "They have the firepower, but we have the agility. Let's use it." They had 35 minutes. The plan came together quickly. The Defiant and Valiant would intercept the rogue ship and provoke it into pursuit. Then they would lead it into the asteroid field, using the rocks as cover while their weapons teams looked for weak points in the enemy's damaged hull. "All hands, battle stations," James announced over the ship's intercom. "This is going to be close, but I need everyone at their best. We are the last line of defense for Helios 4. Those colonists are counting on us." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. James felt a swell of pride watching them. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the oldest or the most technologically advanced. But they were stubborn. They refused to quit, no matter how bad the odds. The 2 human ships accelerated toward the Varath destroyer. As they closed the distance, sensors began picking up more details about their enemy. The ship's weapons were charging, and its engines were pushing it forward at increasing speed. "They see us," Torres reported. "They're turning to engage." "Good," James said. "Let's give them a target." The Defiant and Valiant opened fire, their weapons flashing across the darkness. The shots were not meant to destroy, only to annoy. They splashed against the Varath shields, causing minimal damage but drawing the massive ship's attention. The rogue destroyer responded with a barrage of plasma fire that lit up the void like a solar flare. The human ship scattered, weaving through the attack with moves that looked almost impossible. Torres whooped as they dodged a shot that would have cored them from bow to stern. "They're following us," she reported. "Then let's lead them home," James said. The chase began. The Defiant and Valiant raced toward the asteroid field, with the Varth destroyer close behind. The alien ship was faster than expected, its damaged engines still capable of frightening speed. Several times, its weapons came close enough to singe the human hulls. James kept his eyes on the navigation display, watching the asteroids grow larger as they approached. The field was a chaotic maze of tumbling rocks, some the size of mountains, others no bigger than a car. Flying through it at high speed was like threading a needle while someone threw stones at you. Entering the field in 30 seconds, the helmsman reported. All ships, activate close-range sensors and stay tight, James ordered. Watch each other's backs. The human ships plunged into the asteroid field. Behind them, the Varth destroyer followed without hesitation, its weapons still blazing. But almost immediately, the bigger ship began to struggle. Its bulk made it hard to maneuver between the spinning rocks. Several asteroids slammed against its weakened shields, causing sparks to fly from its hull. The Defiant and Valiant danced through the debris with almost graceful precision. Their pilots made constant adjustments, slipping through gaps that seemed too narrow, spinning around obstacles with split-second timing. It was the kind of flying that other species called reckless. Humans called it Tuesday. They're losing ground, Torres said with excitement. But the Varth ship was not giving up. Even as asteroids pounded its shields, it kept firing. One shot clipped the Valiant's rear section, and James heard Webb curse over the comm. Minor damage, Webb reported. We can still fight. James watched the tactical display, looking for the right moment. The plan was not just to outrun the enemy. It was to find an opening, a chance to strike a decisive blow against the already damaged ship. Then he saw it. A cluster of large asteroids ahead, moving in a slow rotation that would create a brief corridor of open space. If they timed it right, they could swing around and hit the Varth destroyer from multiple angles while it was still struggling with the field. Marcus, do you see that opening? James asked. I see it, Webb replied. Risky, but possible. That's our window. On my mark, we break and attack. The seconds ticked by as the human ships raced toward the asteroid cluster. Behind them, the Varth destroyer was taking more damage from the field, but it was still deadly. Its weapons charged for another salvo. Mark! James shouted. The Defiant and Valiant split apart, swinging around the massive asteroids in opposite directions. The Varth ship tried to track them both, but the asteroids blocked its line of sight. For a precious few seconds, the human ships had the advantage. They opened fire with everything they had. The missiles and energy beams slammed into the weak points of the Varth hull, targeting the areas where damage was already visible. Explosions bloomed across the destroyer's surface. Its shields flickered and failed in several sections. But the alien ship was not finished. It spun its main weapon toward the Defiant, and James realized they were about to be hit. Evasive action, he commanded. The Defiant twisted, but not fast enough. The plasma blast struck their port side, and the ship shuddered violently. Alarms screamed as damage reports flooded in. They were hurt, badly hurt, but still flying. James gripped the arms of his command chair as smoke filled the bridge. This fight was far from over. The damage was bad. The Defiant listed to one side as emergency systems fought to keep the ship stable. Fires burned in 3 sections, and a quarter of their weapons were offline. But James Rourke did not think about retreat. That word had never meant much to him. Damage report, he said through gritted teeth. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5. Contained for now, Torres replied, her fingers flying across her console. Port weapons array is down. Shields at 30%. 30%. That was almost nothing against a ship like the Varth destroyer. But James had faced worse odds before, and he was still here. The Valiant swept past, drawing fire away from the wounded Defiant. Captain Webb's voice crackled over the comm, steady despite the chaos around them. "James, we need a new plan. That thing is still too strong." James stared at the tactical display. The Varith ship had taken heavy damage from their attack, but it was still operational. Its weapons were still deadly, and now it was angry. Then he noticed something on the sensors. The destroyer's reactor was fluctuating. The damage they had inflicted had destabilized its power core. It was not enough to destroy the ship on its own, but if they could hit it again in just the right spot. "Marcus, look at their reactor readings," James said. "They're barely holding together." There was a pause as Webb checked his own sensors. "You want to try and overload it? If we can punch through what's left of their shields and hit the reactor directly, it might trigger a chain reaction." "That's a big if, James. We need to get close. Very close." James knew the risks. Getting close to a wounded predator was never safe. But sometimes there was no other choice. "I'll go in," James said. "The Defiant can take one more run. You cover us. James, we don't have time to argue. Those colonists are counting on us." There was silence on the comm for a moment. Then Webb spoke again, his voice heavy but resolute. "Understood. We'll keep them busy." "Good luck, Commander." The Defiant's engines groaned as they pushed the wounded ship back into the fight. The crew worked with desperate efficiency, rerouting power from non-essential systems to weapons and shields. Every person on board knew what they were about to attempt. None of them hesitated. The Varith destroyer saw them coming. Its weapons turned toward the approaching human ship, charging for a killing blow. But the Valiant was there, strafing the alien vessel and drawing its attention. Asteroids continued to slam against its weakened hull, adding to the chaos. James watched the distance close. 1,000 kilometers, 800, 500. "Target locked on their reactor," Torres reported. "Ready to fire on your command." The destroyer's main weapon swung back toward them. James could see the glow of building energy, knew they had only seconds before it fired. "Now!" he shouted. The Defiant unleashed everything it had left. Missiles, energy beams, even emergency torpedo reserves that were meant for last stands. The barrage tore through space toward the Varith reactor. The alien ship fired at the same instant. The plasma blast struck the Defiant's weakened shields and burned through them like they were paper. The ship lurched as metal screamed and systems failed. James was thrown from his chair as the bridge tilted wildly. But their shots had found their mark. The Varith reactor exploded with a flash of light that briefly outshone the nearest star. The chain reaction ripped through the destroyer, tearing it apart from the inside. Secondary explosions bloomed along its hull as the once mighty vessel broke into pieces. When the light faded, there was nothing left but debris and glowing embers drifting among the asteroids. On the Defiant, James pulled himself up from the deck. His head was bleeding and his ribs ached, but he was alive. Around him, the bridge crew was doing the same, checking systems and checking each other. "Did we get them?" he asked. Torres looked at her console, then looked up with a tired smile. "Target destroyed. The colony is safe." A ragged cheer went up from the survivors. It was not loud or triumphant, just the exhausted relief of people who had given everything and somehow come through. The Valiant pulled alongside the battered Defiant, and Captain Webb appeared on the screen once more. His bridge looked almost as damaged as theirs. "You crazy son of a gun," Webb said with a shake of his head. "You actually pulled it off." James managed a weak smile. "Couldn't have done it without you. Don't go getting humble on me now. That was the most insane flying I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 30 years. The two ships limped toward the colony together. Emergency crews were already scrambling to meet them, ready to help with repairs and treat the wounded. On Helios 4, 30,000 people were waking up to news of their survival, thanks to the two battered ships that had refused to let them die. James sat back in his command chair as medical teams rushed onto the bridge. He thought about the battle about the chaos and the fear and the desperate gamble that had somehow worked. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the most advanced. But they had something that could not be measured by technology or firepower. They had will. They had the stubborn refusal to give up, even when everything said they should. In the darkness of space, surrounded by civilizations that had sailed the stars for thousands of years, humanity was still learning, still growing, still making mistakes. But they were also still fighting, still standing up for those who could not defend themselves, still turning chaos into victory through sheer determination and creativity. As the Defiant docked with the colony station, James allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. They had done the impossible today. They had faced a monster and won, not through superior strength, but through tactics, teamwork, and the unbreakable human spirit. It was not the last battle humanity would face among the stars. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers. Other threats would come, other enemies would rise. But on this day, in this place, humans had proven something important. They had proven that size and power were not everything. They had proven that courage and cleverness could overcome overwhelming odds. They had proven that when the fire came, humanity did not run. They struck back. In the history books that would be written later, this would be recorded as a small engagement, a minor skirmish in the long story of human expansion into the galaxy. But for the people on Helios 4, for the crews of the Defiant and Valiant, it would always mean something more. It would mean hope. It would mean proof that no matter how dark things looked, there was always a chance. And as long as humanity kept fighting, kept standing together, kept turning chaos into advantage, they would never be easy prey. The stars were full of wonders and terrors, but humanity was ready for both. And somewhere out there, the rest of the galaxy was starting to take notice.